This is your spiritual game plan, and I am your host, Sherry Fletcher. Change, it happens to all of us. You've invested your time and energy into an important role, sometimes for years, and then suddenly it's time for you to move on. Maybe you've worked hard on a dream, and now your path is taking a new turn, but the dream isn't going with you. Perhaps you've raised your kids and they've moved on, but now your empty nest is filled with parent care. Or maybe you're in the middle of diaper changes and laundry piles. If you find yourself asking questions like, where do I fit in anymore? Am I even relevant? How do I find my purpose now? You are in the right place. This is a show for women in a season of transition. I believe that while your roles in life will change, your purpose is eternal. I'm here to help you understand just how intentionally you were made by a creator with a game plan. Through interviews and inspirational guests, we'll discover ways to help you unlock the purpose God placed in you, develop a game plan for your life calling, and embrace the intentional masterpiece you were created to be. Today, I'll be talking with Kristie Christie. Kristie has a heart for inspiring people of all relationship statuses to live wholeheartedly in every season. Her messages are heartfelt, humorous, and vulnerable, allowing people to feel seen, understood, and encouraged. Today, Kristie and I are going to talk about when our perfectly planned lives don't match our realities. When life disappoints us or interrupts our plans, we often desire to control, but that gets in the way of the abundant life Jesus invites us into. Today, Kristie's going to remind us that there's something sacred happening in our lives when it gets disrupted. I am so excited, you guys, to bring my friend Kristie Christie onto the podcast today and let her share all things wonderful because she's so much fun to talk to. Thanks for joining me from California.
Oh, man. And thanks for having me, Sherry. It's great to be here with you.
And so before we hit record, we've been having a little issue with our internet. So we're just going to keep our fingers crossed and hope that our talk just keeps coming through. And so, Kristie, I met you at 𝐂𝐓𝐈𝐄's house. You were going to be a presenter for one of the speaker workshops that I was at. And I got to hear the message that we're going to be discussing today and about some of the stuff that you do with kids, and then the message that we're sharing about Barbie's Dreamhouse, which I'm so excited. But one of the things that you shared in that meeting was your work with Compassion International. And I just want to give a little bit of a shout out about you, where you're at, what you're doing, and what is Compassion International.
Absolutely. Well, and I heard you're a new sponsor, right?
I
Exciting. Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, Compassion exists to release children from poverty in Jesus' name. And so we work in 25 countries where kids live in extreme poverty, the poorest to the poor, and we really believe in changing the life of one child and what that ripple effect can be for their whole community. So really focusing on that child's holistic child development. We work with the local church and have our child development centers within the local church. So the kids think they're coming to the church, and you'll never see a sign outside that says Compassion is right here. It's like, this is the church being the church in the community. So it's my greatest joy. I get to be a part of this organization. I first started as a sponsor, then started bringing Compassion to my speaking events, and then came on staff full-time 3.5 years ago. So I work with speakers and communicators that partner with Compassion. So I just love it.
Yeah, it shows. But you have a compassion for kids in general, and that's kind of been one of the things you've done. You have some family resources, and you do speaking on kids. And like we mentioned, I did sponsor a child, and one of the things that was fun to kind of do a little research on Compassion International was the videos that they show of the kids being told that they were chosen.
Aren't those the best? I could literally lay in bed and just like watch those all day.
Yes, I mean, just
so
just knowing that they were chosen and realizing that, as we're chosen by the Lord, and just the same feeling. And I just love knowing that they're going to get basic medical care, and it's just so heart-filling. And so I will have links for the listeners if they want to know more about
Great.
Compassion International. They can contact you and get all that good information. So I'm going to ask some fun facts before we get started. Okay, so like we've mentioned, you love all of God's children, and this has been in your heart since you were a little girl. And you had a collection of a certain kind of doll, and you had a collection. I had two, and my mom had to get on a waiting list for each one individual. So I'm a little bit upset that you were able to collect these. But
okay. Yeah, I had Cabbage Patch dolls, and so I was a big Cabbage Patch fan. My mom and my grandma waited in that line as well on the wait list. So you are not alone.
How many
not for all 13,
have?
but just for the first two actually that I got. And my grandma, it's kind of funny. My grandma went to a boutique and found one that someone had made that was like a kit. So it wasn't a real Cabbage Patch doll, and I rejected it at age 5 or 4. I was like, no, like it's like, no, this isn't a real one. This isn't what I asked for. And so she took that doll to her house and kept it because she said, you don't get to have it. So, but April-lette 𝐂𝐓𝐇 and Bonnie Cheryl were my first two Cabbage Patch dolls. And it's funny when you say looking at your childhood and like who you've become, and I was passionate about having all the different Cabbage Patch dolls. So I had two African-American female Cabbage Patch doll, African-American male. I had a redhead, a blonde, a brunette. I had every type of Cabbage Patch doll that they would make. I had them all in my bay window in my bedroom. And I grew up middle class. Okay, so this isn't like some bougie. I had all these. It's just all my cousins were older than me, and they loved the reaction, I think. So they just kept buying me Cabbage Patch dolls. So yeah, but it is funny, like you said, just thinking about that trajectory that like this is something that was deep inside of me from the beginning.
And that goes right into the question that I do ask everyone on my show is like, how far back can you go look back in your life and see the very purpose you're living today and who you've always been?
Yeah. Yeah. So many things, right? I think I was speaking from the time I was a little girl. I was the MC of the talent show. I was up for singing the solo. I was up for all that. I just love, but I also, and it wasn't out of a real performance-y place, but just, I love creating space for people to gather and connect. And so I think that that's really at the core of who I am. And then I want everyone to feel valued in the room. I want no one to be left out. And I see that if I could tell you story after story from when I was a kid, but yeah, I think I've always just had a passion to connect the rich to the poor as well, and to make sure that kids, that we all stay, I guess, the hierarchy that can be inherent, the classism, the racism, all of that. I just want to tear those apart because I believe that's who Jesus is. He just equalizes. He sits down next to the woman at the well and breaks the cultural norms. And just, I think I always just want to be a person that's approachable to everybody, that I don't think I'm up in this other place, because I believe every person has this divine child of godness inside of them. And so I guess my mission in life is to make sure everybody knows how loved they are and seen and cared for. And so whether that's a child that I worked with in Malibu when I was a children's and family ministry director, or a kid I meet in Nicaragua, or a woman I meet in Nicaragua. I met this woman once, like about a year ago, and I just sat with her and talked with her, and I just felt like this is what it's about. Like, can you hang kind of with anybody? Just that's Jesus, So I haven't perfected that at all, but I just feel like that's what I'm striving towards in my life.
Yeah. And that passion is so palpable when you're looking at your face. And when I see you speaking, it just comes out. And I love seeing that. So like we've mentioned, God has placed this passion for kids in your life. And it like when you're writing and you're speaking, even if you're writing or speaking about world events, you bring a childlike element into what you're writing. And I love a good metaphor. I have a metaphor I didn't like. And so it makes it very memorable. Things stick. And so I remember one of the talks you gave was with the light bright. You did a little.
Oh yeah.
So see,
Yes.
you were talking to us as speakers and writers, and you were, using a childlike element to bring out, a feeling, and so it stuck. And so today, we're going to be talking about what you do when your plans do not meet your expectations. And of course, we're going to be using Barbie Dreamhouse as
Yeah.
an example. But I had to stop and think about that when my plans don't meet my expectations. A lot of times we think, oh, it doesn't meet others, but yet I have an expectation when I set out with plans. And a majority of the time they don't go the way I thought. But then I start rearranging things, thinking that I have control then to rearrange the plan. So it's still going to go to my expectations. So I would love to hear your take on the topic of when Barbie's dream house has an earthquake. Where did that
Yeah,
come
this is
from?
a talk I put together. I was actually speaking to a bunch of girls at Pepperdine about body image, and I came up with this title for my talk to hopefully capture their imagination and their attention. And then it kind of evolved into a keynote presentation I've given a lot. And it's just, I guess it's the heart of who I am and what I want to say to the world. And just that, so the story goes, this is how I got to it. Is I, like I said, I grew up my mom's a teacher, my dad's an x-ray tech, or they both are retired now, but we didn't have a lot. Hand-me-downs were a thing and in my childhood. And so one day my mom said, hey, there's something in your room, you should go check it out. Well, I had circled in the JCPenney catalog like 65 times that I wanted the Barbie Dreamhouse, but I just knew it was out of range probably for me at the moment. As a 5-year-old, and I went into my bedroom and I had a set hand-me-down Barbie Dreamhouse filled up all the square footage of my room. And so I would just focus in, make that dream house just perfect. Where's little fork, all the little things. And then my brother would come in. He's a year and a half younger than me. And so he would come in double fisted Ninja Turtles and he'd say, can we play? And I'd say, no, sir. Like, this is Barbie's dream house. Take your sewer friends elsewhere. And then in retaliation, when I was out of the room, he would play Earthquake because we're Southern California kids. And so earthquakes were part of life. And he would just shake that Barbie dream house and all the pieces would fall on the floor. And so that is kind of the analogy, like you said, just the picture that has shaped a lot of the way I think about all the disappointments I've had in my life, the tragedy, the trauma, all the things that have broken my heart. I think we have a choice. We can pick up all the pieces and pretend like it never happened. Or we can say, gosh, does God have a new plan? A renovation plan? Do we put things back together differently because of what happened? And what comes next? And so I want to live authentically, and I don't want to hide and pretend everything's fine. And I don't think that's the best thing. I don't think that's the way of God's kingdom. I think that's the way of maybe the way that we think the world should be. And so we just pretend, and it feels better to suck it up and pretend. But the truth is we can really kill our soul that way and create this long, I feel like we end up storing up all this disappointment and pain and grief, and it will erupt out of us. It's waiting there for us. So yeah.
That's so good. And we definitely, in 2020 had our Barbie dream house. It had an earthquake. I think everyone's did. And so being able to say, okay, it's a remodel. And a lot of people keep saying when it gets back to the norm. And I think we have to realize it's not going to get back to the norm, but that maybe God didn't want it to get back to the norm.
Right.
And he didn't want us to pick up the pieces and put them right back in the place and pretend it didn't happen. And so it's so relevant to, doing a remodel. I like that.
Yeah, renovation. We're renovating our life. I think you're right. I think, early on when we thought this would all last like 3 weeks, remember that? We were like, in three
Yes.
weeks we'll reopen. Sure. Um, I remember thinking there was a quiet to the world that I thought there's something sacred happening right now, and we could miss it and hurry back into the noise of our normal, or this is a pause, like a global pause. Now,
Wow.
and I want to be clear, there has been so much trauma and crisis. I don't want to minimize
Absolutely.
that at all, because there is
Absolutely.
so much pain that has happened this year that we will frankly be recovering from the rest of our lives.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I think there's a real opportunity to restore, revive, come back to life in a new way that will be hopefully better, in some ways, really better.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. It's you never, never minimize the devastation left. But we need to come together and say, what can we do now to restore?
Right.
And so I think that's where we're at. And one of the things that you talk about in the Dreamhouse Barbie talk is the busyness.
Yeah.
And so, I was talking to you a little bit before we hit record that I'm an Enneagram 7. And so busyness is my middle name. And even if I'm sitting still, my brain's like going on. It's even planning next Christmas. And but looking back on 2020, no one had a choice. We had to be still and know. And as I was writing that out, I thought, let's take the K off of that. No, we have to be
Mm,
still and now and be
yeah.
present. And,
That's
you know, I talk to a lot of women who think that their purpose is the role that they have, and that they believe that what they do is who they are, and what can we get done. And today we're going to be talking about 3 idols, modern day idols, and one of them is what we are accomplishing can be an idol. And so talk to me a little bit about the busyness over presence, about being able to be still and be now.
Yes. I think that is so good. I love the way you put that. That is so good. Um, yeah, I think we've been forced at first maybe to be present and to be here. And that has been for some, and even I'll fess to it, for me at times, it was really excruciating because busyness can be a real great distraction from the things we want to hide from and not look at. And so the truth is, this is our life. Right now, we're living it. We don't have a promise of tomorrow. We don't have a promise of 40 years. We don't have a promise of, we have no idea. So the truth is, I believe that the best life is lived in the present, and that is really where God is that when we're in the present, God's presence is with us. We're able to be in communion with Him, because when we're so stuck in the past or so stuck in the future, we miss the gift of today. And I know that sounds, that's a cliche poster that's been on every wall in every office and whatever, but the truth is, being present can be really hard. And I think that we have to practice that daily and returning to it. And so when I start my morning, um, I'll stand in the shower, and it's called mindfulness, but it really is about being present. And so I'll look at that shower head and feel the water beat on my face, and I'll think, thank you, God, for this water and for the feeling, the sensation of being cleaned and washed, and the heat, and just noticing all the sensory details of life can really help us be present. And I think that it doesn't mean that busyness is all bad, because my life is full. But I began this practice a few years ago of not answering the question, how are you, with busy? Because I think that becomes a rite of, like, we feel like, oh, I'm so important now because I'm so busy. The truth is, I'm in charge of my calendar. I can shut it all down. I could start it all up. There are people that depend on me. So part of that is dependent, but the truth is we could shut it down. So I started to say, wow, I have a really full week ahead, because what I'm filling my life with is my choice. And so I want, or most of the time. And so I want to be grateful for everything that fills my calendar and fills my life, and then also take inventory of that on regular. What about you?
Yeah, I I do. I'm the same way. When you ask someone how they are and they go, "Oh, I'm so busy," it kind of makes it sound like I don't even have time to hear what you how you are.
Oh, wow.
And
Such a good
so
point.
and
Yeah.
so a lot of times I'll just, if, how are you doing? I'll say, I'm doing really great today. And because right now I am at this moment.
Yeah.
And I'm careful, if I'm having a really bad day, I'm careful who I, vomit that on. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Mhm.
I do get that feeling, like you said, when you ask someone what they're doing and they say, I'm so busy. Sometimes I want to say, well, yeah, you and the world. I mean, we're all busy, but how are you? How are you? And I want to hear, are you happy? I'm sad. I'm thankful. And also think about it too. You have an opportunity right then. When someone says, how are you? You have an opportunity to leave them feeling better and
Mm,
just say,
that's so true.
I'm really feeling blessed today that, God has answered my prayer this way, and even shift the paradigm of their thought process.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is so true.
So,
You know, it reminds me right now outside of my window, it is extremely windy. It's like up to 50-mile-an-hour winds. And I have been through many fires. So I worked at a church where it completely burned to the ground. So there's one of my Barbie Dreamhouse moments that literally Malibu Barbie, it was Malibu Presbyterian Church, burned to the ground on a Sunday morning. So I battle with a little PTSD when that wind starts to whip. And then we were evacuated 2 years ago, right after actually, no, I think it was a year after I met you, but or before I met you. But this uh our house almost burned down. And so when the wind starts to whip, I really, you too? Oh my gosh. Yeah. So you know how it is. You know, the wind starts to whip and it can be really, really scary. And so um but my next door neighbor is from the East Coast. And so I kept in our group text like, it's windy, I'm scared, I hate it, I hate the wind. And she turned to me and said, Kristie, I don't hate the wind. I said, you don't? Why? Why? And she said, because it reminds me of winter. And it's just, I love wintertime. It reminds me of growing up in a place where it snowed and all of that. She said, we don't get snow here, but the wind makes me feel close to winter. And I was like, oh my gosh, she just transformed my perspective for the day. Doesn't mean the fire risk isn't there, but instead I'm going, oh, it's blustery and wintry outside. I'm going to enjoy that differently. So I think you're so right that we have this incredible power in the present day to help transform someone's perspective. It's a real
yeah,
gift.
yeah. And
Mm.
um, the next question,
Yeah.
the next idol, because when you hear the word idol, you always think of the Bible, the stories. I mean, they were worshiping,
Yeah. Like
statues.
the scale and the cat. Yeah, exactly.
And so I always think, I don't idol worship.
Right.
But when you think of modern day idols, so many things we're not aware of. You really got to pay attention to what your focus is on. And I think one of the things that's going to be really hard for us now, coming out of a pandemic, is the extreme individualism and being, vulnerable, and again joining into a community setting. And I think because we been so isolated, and I think that's one of the enemy's plans. He loves to isolate us and make us think we don't need anyone, or that no one else understands and we're on our own. And now, we've had this long time of isolation. But how is individualism an idol?
Yeah. This came up for me when I first got married. And we took our assessments, premarital counseling. And mine came up with high individual, and he came up as he likes to be on the team. So I had to have this real moment with myself to realize, because of some of the, so backing up to childhood, because of some of the things that had happened in my childhood, I had really developed a very strong center of, I got this, like okay, no one's gonna rescue me from this. All right, I got this. So individualism in many ways, living by myself. I bought a house by myself as a single woman. I was like I got this. I'm going to build the life I want to live. All those things are wonderful. And I think that drive and vision for my life was a great thing. But I think I really had to grapple with why I was so, why it was an idol. And not in a way that I worshiped it or I loved it so much, but I think our culture really does elevate that in America. And some of that is really good, but some of it can really get in the way of connection with others and dependence on others. So early on in our relationship, he'd be like, "Can I pick up your prescription at the pharmacy?" And I'd be like, "I'm good. I got it." Because I feared if he didn't pick it up, how would I feel? And if I let my guard down, will people come through for me? And the truth is, people will fail me. He will forget at some point. Well, all of that will happen, but I'm better when I'm in community and relationship. And so I will say, actually, during COVID, my world has gotten smaller, right? But there's an interdependency on my block between the women. We're friends, and we have a group text like, "I'm going to Trader Joe's. What do you need?" And we Venmo back and forth and all of that, and we meet in the backyard or front yard for an evening hang, and that's been really rich, but I know that's not been everybody's experience. There is a richness that I observe as well, which is this interdependency that is essential, right? It's like you have to rely on each other when you're stripped down to real survival. And so there is a richness to that, and there's almost this envy that we can have as Americans when we witness the communal lifestyle that happens so much in Latin America, Asia, Africa. That's part of the culture, number one, and then number two is important, is needed, in that. And so I think really, I think taking an inventory of the people that are in our lives, and then being really intentional to reach out, to start group chats, texts, all of that right now when we're in this. And then to start really thinking about who are the people that bring me life, and then who are the people I can bring life to. There's going to be people that take and people that give. And I think making sure our lives are filled with both, and that we create moments for connection and community. That's what's going to, that is important. Interdependency is how we're wired and created. Right. And so without that, we can be so lonely. And you hear a lot about loneliness right now. And so I try and reach out to a few people a week that I think of, that as I pray and say, "God, who could you put on my mind just to love and help and reach out?" Just call and say, "Hey," because I don't think any of us are meant to be alone.
No, absolutely not. But it does get a comfort. It gets a comfort level that you have to be careful, because then, even now when I'm thinking, oh, I would have to get up and get dressed and make an effort to go out there. I could just stay comfy and stay in the house. And
good point.
So Kristie, if you were to ask me if I was a perfectionist, I would automatically say no, because I really can honestly tell you, if you knocked on my door right now, I'd let you come in for coffee. I'd probably have to wash the mug first. But I'd invite you in for coffee, and I'd love to sit down and chat. But then there are moments when I get asked to do something and I'll say no because it's not going to look good enough, or I don't have the outline perfectly ready. And I get caught up in like, okay, if it's not going to be perfect, then I'm not going to do it. And so when you're talking about perfectionist being an idol, how can we switch that train of thought?
Well, that's so good. And I think you're right. I think we quickly go to, well, my house is kind of a mess, so I must not be a perfectionist, and I think we can just, it rears its ugly head in different ways, right? So it might be that you don't want anyone to know the pain in your life, and so that makes you a perfectionist. Or it's really anything that causes us to hide reality. And it's not that we shouldn't strive for excellence and all those things. I think that's honestly a great thing to strive for excellence and to do things well, do our work well. But it's when perfectionism gets in the way and becomes the focus that maybe the image matters more than the heart and what's really happening. And so I focus on the word freedom and to make sure that I'm living in a free way and that I'm uh, comfortable admitting when I've been wrong. That's another way perfectionism shows up in relationships is I think it's one of the most important things we can teach kids to do. And then also, it's something, man, marriage has taught me really well is I need to get more and more comfortable with saying, hey, I said that and I shouldn't have, and I'm so sorry. And it's amazing how that process of if you can't say you're sorry, then that person doesn't have the space to say, I forgive you, right? So if we're constantly in this struggle of trying to be right, and our rightness, there's no connection. And so I think the freedom that we can find when we let go of this idea, everything that I'm going to have it all right all the time. I'm going to have the right opinions, the right thoughts, the right words. Like there is an edit button on everything right now for a reason. We need the ability to say, hey, I need to take a pause. I'm so sorry. And so that's really how I see it. I have a Brene Brown quote that I love about perfectionism. It says, understanding the difference between healthy striving and perfectionism is critical in laying down the shield and picking up your life. Research shows, this is interesting, that perfectionism hampers success. In fact, it's often the path to depression, anxiety, addiction, and life paralysis. Perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels this primary thought. If I look perfect and do everything perfectly, I can avoid and minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, and blame. Isn't that good? So it's really sometimes we just want to cover. It's as primary as Genesis. We want to cover our shame with a picture that maybe doesn't match reality. And so saying, hey, I'm struggling, I'm in pain, all of that is a way to step away from perfectionism and into freedom.
Yeah, I was visualizing, God tells us we're his masterpiece. And I was visualizing us looking at the masterpiece and going, no, you missed a spot here. Let me help you fix the masterpiece you created. We're looking, it's not perfect enough, God. You didn't do it right. Let me help you out with that. That is so powerful. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with me in the middle of a windstorm.
Yep. Man, this has been great. The minute I met you, Sherry, I was like, oh, I just met a precious, speaking of masterpiece, one of God's precious people in this world. And I'm so glad you have a podcast because I feel like more and more people need to know you and hear all the depth in you. So thanks for having me. It's such an honor.
That was a gift. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed my time with Kristie Christie. I loved her analogy of the Barbie Dreamhouse. And I like that she challenges us that when things do get back to the norm, we don't just pick up the pieces and pretend it didn't happen. Ways to connect with Kristie are in the show notes, as well as link to Compassion International. Kristie has a heart for children living in extreme poverty, and you can find out more when you look at compassioninternational.com. If you have not subscribed to this podcast, please do so. That way, you will not miss up-and-coming episodes. And when you leave a rating and a review, that helps me serve you better, as well as helps others find the podcast. During today's episode, did a friend come to mind who you know would be blessed by this message? If so, would you share this link with them? Listeners like you sharing links with others is how this podcast can reach more people. I'd also love to have you subscribe to my email list. I will send a weekly update with a little more of a personal touch and information about new episodes before they come out. Thank you so much for tuning into Your Spiritual Game Plan, the podcast that helps you understand God has a plan and you have a purpose in it.